So glad you're back. We are taking our one sausage bolognese sauce and making yet a third meal with it. Now, if you remember, for the sausage bolognese, we used 1 pound of ground sausage, and you can use sweet, mild, spicy, whatever you like. To that, we added a can of diced tomatoes, half a can of tomato sauce, 1 tablespoon of tomato paste, and a teaspoon of sugar. And then we mixed it all up into an incredible bolognese-esque sauce. Then we added some rice and made some beautiful, healthy stuffed green peppers. Then we went to the Mediterranean and had a delicious moussaka with some eggplant and a velvety bechamel on top with the sauce. And now we're going to make stuffed shells, but these are not your mother's stuffed shells. We're going to lighten them up quite a bit and make them into something delicious and a little less filling, a little more guilt-free than the typical stuffed shell. What we're going to use is, of course, our sausage bolognese. And I have the shells. I've already gone ahead and boiled them because nobody wants to watch a pot of water boil. And instead of the ricotta, the way I'm going to lighten them up is I'm going to make a bechamel sauce. Let me grab my pot. And the bechamel is going to start with a roux. And we did this for the moussaka also. And for a roux, you're going to use equal parts fat and flour. So I have 4 tablespoons of butter. Plop those in there. And it always goes a little quicker if you leave your butter out ahead of time so it gets a little soft. And I've got 4 tablespoons of flour. So again, equal amounts of fat and flour, 4 tablespoons of butter, 4 tablespoons of flour. Okay, so my butter is melted and it's thoroughly incorporated with the flour. And I usually let it sit for maybe about a minute or so because you want that raw flour flavor to be gone. So you want to keep whisking it so you don't get little chunks and you want to make sure it doesn't burn. Okay, now I'm going to add some milk to that, and I'm only going to add 1 1/4 cup of milk because I want it to be a little firmer once it finishes cooking, once it bakes in the oven. You want to add it kind of slowly so you can try to avoid the lumps. And just keep whisking the whole time. And once you've got about half of your liquid in, you can go ahead and dump in the rest. You don't have to worry about lumps. Set that down. Now I'm just going to bring it up to a boil. It's going to start to bubble, and I'm going to throw a few more ingredients in there. Our sauce has thickened up beautifully. Look at that. Oh my gosh, this is going to be so good. And similar to the moussaka, I'm going to add 1/4 cup of Parmesan cheese. You really want to get that nice and stirred in there. So there is cheese, in these stuffed shells, just not a really heavy cheese. I'm going to add half a teaspoon of dried parsley. I'm going to add half a teaspoon of dried oregano, half a teaspoon of garlic powder. See, I make things simple, half, half, half. And then just to get this kind of a nicer, firmer filling, I'm going to add 1 egg. I'm going to go ahead and use my milk jar here, or milk cup. And I'm going to mix it up before I put it into the sauce. And then once I get ready to put it in, I'm going to make sure I'm constantly whisking, because if I don't, then you might get little chunks of cooked eggs in your white sauce. I'm going to go ahead and pour that in. There you go, and you can see it's turned a little bit yellow, and you can see all of those beautiful herbs in there. It's getting a little thicker, and our bechamel is done. I'm going to let this cool for just a second because we're getting ready to pipe it into our shells. So our bechamel has cooled down, and I've put it in a piping bag. You have to let it cool because you need to be able to handle it. Otherwise, it gets pretty hot. And I have my shells that I've pre-cooked. Let me find one. This is going to get a little messy, so make sure your hands are clean. You're definitely going to use them. The first thing I do, you got to kind of hold them and put your finger kind of there so that they stay open. I'm going to pipe some of the bechamel into it. And this is where you would put your ricotta. And there we go. And you can just, whoa! Let's see, you can just see it going in there. It's really creamy and it's really light. And with the spices and the garlic, it tastes delicious. And then I'm going to take a spoonful of this sausage and just, there we go, put it right in there. And if you want, you can take a little bit of this sauce and kind of stick it on the plate a little bit on your pie pan or baking dish, and it kind of helps hold the little guys in place. I'll put a little bit more in there. So you really don't need a whole lot. This will take, for 12 to 14 stuffed shells, it'll take half of that sausage bolognese recipe that we talked about. Okay, I'll put that little guy there, and I'm just going to keep stuffing. So I've got my shells stuffed, and I'm just going to finish them off before I put them into the oven. I have one of those little mini bell peppers chopped up. It's an orange one. You don't need to add this at all, but I always like to put in some extra vegetables whenever I can. So I'm just going to kind of sprinkle that around the edges and around top. Then, if you remember, when we made our bolognese, we used half a can of tomato sauce. So here's the other half of a can, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour that right on top of my shells. And this is going to help keep them tender when they're baking in the oven, and it's going to give them a little extra flavor. You really kind of want to make sure you get the ends too. So I'm covering up my beautiful little star, but that's okay. And actually, I'm going to add some fresh basil. Let me spread this around a little bit. And I have this little plant in my kitchen, in my window, and I pick basil off of there. And poor thing, it never lasts because I always eat it. So I'm constantly having to replace my basil plant. I don't know if that happens to you, but boy, the struggle is real. So I've gotten some basil leaves, and I've just torn them into smaller pieces. I didn't chop them, nothing fancy. I'm just going to sprinkle them right on top of this tomato sauce. And I've got my oven preheated to 350 degrees. And I think you're really going to love the bechamel. It gives it such a nice creamy texture to it. And in the final step, I'm going to put some mozzarella on top. You can put Parmesan, any kind of cheese you want. You can leave the cheese off too. You can load it on, whatever makes you happy. I've got about a quarter cup here. And it just looks so beautiful and healthy and yummy. Cannot wait to have this for dinner or lunch, or maybe lunch and dinner. If you're really into the cheese, dump it all on there, but for me that is good. So my oven's at 350. I'm going to pop this in there for 25 minutes, and you are going to see a beautiful, gooey, delicious stuffed shell dish come out. Oh my gosh, it smells so good in here. And look at that, the cheese is melted, the edges are kind of nice and crusty. I like that. Ooh, look at that cheese. Let's see. Let's cut this guy open. So look at that. It is so delicious, and that bechamel has just really mixed really well with that meat mixture, so you're not biting into a big chunk of it. It's light. It doesn't have that kind of grainy texture that ricotta can sometimes have. This is absolutely delicious. It's a wonderful trip to Italy. I'm sure you're going to love it. If you missed any of the show, especially how to make the delicious sausage bolognese, or if you'd like to catch some other episodes, you can check us out at Yurview.com. Don't forget to like me on Facebook at Karen is Cooking from the Heart. And this and many other recipes can be found at cookingfromtheheart.tv. Most importantly, remember, you don't have to be a trained cook or chef to make delicious, healthy meals for you and your family. You just have to cook from the heart. You definitely have to check this out if you want a little taste of grease in your kitchen. I can't say that. Grease in your kitchen? Our thoughts.
Super savory, soft stuffed shells, part 1.
Shucks, sounds sweet.